Another day, another broken VXR. I took it for its MOT the other day and it failed on rear axle bushings excessively worn, which is a common problem on these cars, and sort of explains why it felt like it was dragging the rear end about and rolling a lot in corners. So I'm going to spin it around, get it jacked up, see what play there is in the rear axle, and then start stripping it down and order some parts, I guess. I'll probably get Whiteline rear axle bushers, about the same as the Powerflex ones from what I've read, and a Whiteline adjustable rear anti-roll bar, and those will be going on in the coming days so I can get the car back on the road.
With the car in the air, I can really easily check the play between the axle and the bushing by pushing and pulling on the wheel at different angles. As you can see, there's loads of movement. If I can do that by hand, imagine how much the axle's moving under the body of the car when cornering at high speed. I'm blasting the bolts on the axle mount with WD-40 well before I start the job to make sure it has time to penetrate. These bolts have been under the car exposed to dirt, grime and moisture for 13 years, so it's worth doing to make sure they're easy to break loose. While that soaks, I'm going to get the wheels off and unbolt the dampers so I can prepare to drop the rear axle.
Right, so by taking the springs out, that means when we detach the axle mounting brackets with a jack under the torsion beam across the middle, that bit there, we're just using the dampers to hold the axle up. Because the springs aren't in the way, the whole lot should be able to pivot forwards so we can get the bushers out. Can't really get the bolts out with the brackets still attached, so I paint marked them so that they line up when I put the car back together. And yeah, get on with taking the axle off now. Right then, parts ferries have been, well, postman, and dropped off what should be my rear axle bushers and anti-roll bar, as you can see. Get these open. So here's new, oh bloody hell, so here's new rear axle bolts that go through the bushings, hold the axle on to the brackets. And here's the new bushings, Whiteline polyurethane ones. They're much stiffer than the stock ones, so should reduce the flex, reduce the axle movement. And then obviously the anti-roll bar itself with the fitting kit, which was taped up down here. So yeah, it's time to get on with the job.
In between working on the car, we nipped to Costco and picked up this Arcan steel 3-ton trolley jack. This thing is super solid, weighing in at 40 kilograms, and it has both longer reach and lower entry than my puny Halford's 2-ton low-profile jack. This should be a great help for refitting the axle later on and keeping it from moving about too much while knocking the bushings out. And of course, the best way to test a new jack is by lifting your significant other. On the outside of each bushing is a plastic cap, which pops right off. Now it's time to start hammering out the bushings. The simplest way I found was to wedge a screwdriver between the aluminium housing of the bushing and the steel of the axle. Hammer it through to the back of the bushing, fold the aluminium inwards, and repeat in another spot if that didn't loosen it up enough. It helps to occasionally use a larger chisel to open up the hole made by the screwdriver. I also got the screwdriver between the flared inner side of the bushing and the axle, pushing it out slightly from the rear, which seemed to help a lot. Now for the other side. This isn't the most fun job to do on your driveway. It takes hours unless you're lucky and the bushings on your car want to play nice. However, it's definitely worth it in the end for the improved road feel, with the back of the car becoming much more planted and predictable.
Thank God. Fueled by this stuff. It's the only reason I got it out. Right, so I got the old bushings out eventually. As you can see, they took quite a lot of battering. They're no longer even remotely round, but they're out. So I can't complain other than about the hours of my life that I've lost. Here's the new bushings for comparison. 2-piece, so they just slide right in. They're not like friction fit. And they have, if I can get one out, these metal inserts that go through the middle, same as the old ones. And I also picked up brand new bolts, which I don't know if I've already shown, but ordered all this from Courtenay Sport, so they have the GM original stuff as well, just to be safe, not reusing an old rusty bolt that's been under the car 13 years. So let's get to it.
I'm cleaning out the bore with a wire brush and some brake cleaner before inserting the new bushings. The front and rear faces are greased with the included Whiteline lithium grease, and so is the internal bore where the metal crush tube goes. You shouldn't grease the outside of the bushing though, as it's a friction fit and only the crush tube should be able to rotate. I've not had any extra creaking or groaning from doing it this way, which is how Whiteline suggest. With the bushings fitted, I can stick the brackets back on, jack the axle up, align it to the paint marks I put on earlier, and bolt it back together. I've left the nuts off the swivel bolts to make it easier to line the brackets up, and because they'll have to be off so we can add a bracket for the anti-roll bar later anyway.
So that right side mount is now lined back up with the paint marks I put on before. I've not done it up all the way, and I didn't do up the bolt that goes through the bushing, just to let the axle swivel easily while I do the rest of the work. But yeah, just got to get the other side lined up. Hopefully that's pretty much there anyway, and I can get the springs back in and torque everything up properly, and should be good to go.
This bracket for the anti-roll bar is hung from the factory swivel bolt using the top hole with the captive studs facing the inside of the car. This is where the D-bushes will attach. The nut is then fitted as normal but left loose until the car is at ride height so everything can move freely. Now we have to put a 10mm drill bit through the hole in the middle of the spring seat on the trailing arm. This allows us to drop a bolt through to hang an angle bracket for the drop links to fasten up to.
So Whiteline say you don't need to grease these anti-roll bar bushings. They're self-lubricating PTFE. I guess they can only self-lubricate for so long, so to be, you know, better safe than sorry, I'm going to grease these up with some old Powerflex assembly grease that came with a set of bushings years ago for a Mini, which I forgot to put on them at the time, and it squeaked its tits off, so let's avoid that happening. Just grease up the outside. Probably shouldn't touch this stuff, but be 8. And the inside as well on both bushings.
Next we can bolt the anti-roll bar to the brackets we added earlier. This is much easier with a jack to hold the bar up while you thread the nuts on by hand, but even then it's hard to balance the bar on the seat of the jack.
So I've realised my rookie error. I noticed there's a bit of a bend in the end of the anti-roll bar, and my dumbass put it in upside down so it's bent away from where it mounts to the end of the swing arms. Flipped it over now, bit of pissing about, but it's done. So I can get little drop link things bolted up. And I've just jacked the axles up to ride height rather than taking the car off the stands. And I'm going to tighten everything up once it's all bolted together. Yeah, just to avoid tightening it up, full droop, and then everything wanting to move, but it can't because it's, you know, all the bolts are too tight once the car's loaded down. The instructions do say to do it with the car on the floor, but if you've got 2 jacks and you can get the car to ride high, it's going to be a lot easier to reach the bolts, so I'm doing it this way. And for the setting, because this is the adjustable version, I'm just using apparently what Courtenay Sport recommend to start with at least. I may do a comparison of the different settings, see how much body roll you get from looking at it from the rear. But this setting is second hole in from the front on the sway bar itself, and then the first hole on the bracket above from the front, closest to the front. That's one side bolted up, I'll bolt the other side up, and then make sure everything's sat in line and pattern it all down.
It's worth noting that the front hole on the top bracket is used for the front 2 holes on the ARB, and the rear hole on the top bracket is used for the rear 2 holes on the ARB. The further towards the front you go on the bar itself, the stiffer the bar is going to be, resulting in less roll at the rear of the car. This reduces rear grip, but increases front grip, making the car more balanced and easier to rotate. If you go too stiff, you might find that the handling becomes unstable, ride quality is too harsh for road use, or you get a bit too much lift off oversteer.
That's all straight now. Just need to get a couple of spanners and tighten that up. Jobs are good. That's about 90 Newton meters. I think it's plus 60 degrees, plus 15. I've got an angle gauge thing, so can't really be precise about it, but roughly works out. Same for the other side, and then we're done.
Just like that, the Whiteline rear axle bushes and the adjustable anti-roll bar are all fitted. Now I just have to unbolt the top of the dampers again and refit the springs, then refit the dampers before the car can go back on all 4 wheels.
Thing, gotta not forget the handbrake cable which clips onto these brackets on either side, which I had to take out to get to the rear axle bushes a bloody long time ago when I started this job. I've been working on it sort of a couple of hours here and there after work and on lunch and stuff for like the last few days. With that clip back on, springs back in, dampers bolted up and everything torqued to spec, I think it's time to get the wheels on and drop the car down for the first time in ages.
Time for the finishing touch. The anti-roll bar came with a sheet of Whiteline stickers, and these yellow ones will look pretty good next to my WaveTrack stickers on the rear windows. In the next video, I'll do a quick comparison of the handling before and after fitting the anti-roll bar. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it and leave a comment with what you want to see in the future.